episode of the Lead Stories podcast. I'm meant to say the next line, no? Don't I? Yeah. Well, we believe that everyone has influence.
And those who are intentional with their influence are leaders.
Do you think I'm going to get this line one day?
I know.
No.
You'll get it right about the time we decide we're going to change it.
We're going to change it, yeah.
Anyway, I'm Pastor Steph.
And I'm Joe Saxton. It's good to be with you.
It's great to be with you. Welcome. We started a new series last week.
We did.
What got you here won't get you there.
And it's the notion that with our goals and aspirations and the things that we feel we want to do as leaders, that it's going to require some change, and it's going to be demanding, and it will require a retooling.
Retooling, pivoting, positioning differently.
Repositioning, reworking. In fact, I find this thing happening in my own very life.
I think many people do.
Yes.
And or you have, or it's upcoming.
Yes.
Perhaps. And we didn't come up with this phrase.
No.
So if it sounds familiar, it's not because of us.
No, we know there's at least one book by Marshall Goldsmith which talks about this in the context of coaching and leadership.
Yeah, but it's a brilliant phrase because I think it is a moment when oftentimes it's spoken, there's a deep sense about that.
Yeah.
You don't even always know what that means for you or what the next steps is right away, but it gives you that sense of like, ooh, I might be in one of those moments. I might be in one of those seasons, one of those moments where what got me here won't get me there.
Yeah.
And then you start to ask questions like, well, what is there? What's the definition of that? And how did I get here? And lots of other things. So we're going to actually pause and say, instead of feeling that sense around that statement, let's move into it and get deeper into it and dig into it and say, what could this mean for our leadership? So today we're gonna handle a section of the surrounding issues of what got you here won't get you there. With the topic, Joe, do you want to introduce it?
It's like you're afraid to say the topic. It's like you're afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of.
It's a lot.
The title for this week is Plateaus and Comfort Zones.
Plateaus and comfort zones.
And the sense that, it's the sense that when we get here, wherever our here is, we've achieved something professionally. We have started a new relationship. But our purposes were mainly leadership we were going to focus on.
Yep.
We've achieved a particular goal that we just rest there and stay there, and our achievement becomes a comfort zone for us.
Yeah. So then today we're going to look at basically kind of things we can't do.
Yeah.
Because they're the things that are keeping us in the plateaus or the comfort zones. What can't we do if we want to get from here to there?
Yeah, what needs to shift, what needs to stop, what are the tendencies that kind of creep around that we might assume, I think we may assume they get us to the next level, we may assume they get us further, but they actually prevent us from doing so.
Yes. So the number one thing that these are not in order of importance, but they're just a list. Okay?
They're in order of things that came to mind.
That's actually just what
that's
happened.
the truth.
So the first thing we thought of was the idea of we can't rely on past achievements.
Which is hard. I struggle with this because on one level, sometimes I so don't rely on past achievements, I don't acknowledge them.
That's true. There is the sense of like not celebrating or owning or acknowledging those past achievements.
And that's not what we're saying. We're not saying don't celebrate how far you've come.
No.
We're not saying don't value them, and we're certainly not dismissing them. We're not doing that thing of where next.
Right.
However, in a changing world, when we're growing as leaders, to look to the past as a nostalgic trophy rather than a springboard into the future can be problematic.
Ooh, nostalgic trophy, that's rough.
Well, it's like you look back and think, I'm able to do this because of the thing I led 20 years ago.
Yeah, right. I've developed some deep theories around only one experience that I actually had.
I accomplished this, so I know all there is to know.
Yeah.
It can limit our learning, it can limit our growth. And I think it's worth us always being encouraged by our past achievements, but not dependent on them in a sense that it stops us from moving forward.
Yeah, that's really good. And kind of just this idea that I think entitlement comes up too. Like I've earned this because of these achievements that I've made, and it's not that's not true. I mean, if you get a degree, a master's degree, you have earned the right to be in certain spaces. So it's not that. It's just the sense of assuming then there's no more things you need to step into.
Well, and I think we have found that in a changing world as well, when the degrees we once relied on don't mean anything anymore.
Right. Actually,
you know what I mean?
That brings us to the second thing. We can't just assume that the context changing around us doesn't affect us. We can't assume that the changing context means that we can do business as usual.
Because we can't.
We can't. Right.
That there are shifts that happen in our culture all the time that change the game for us.
Yeah.
And so the internet changed the game for us.
Right. Yeah.
Changed the game for education, publishing, study, all of these things.
And sometimes
entertainment.
it's really good. Sometimes it's really hard, but nevertheless, it's a change.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that there's now opportunities that both you and I have to do coaching online. That's amazing.
That's amazing.
There are people that we can connect with that we never would have been able to, even a few years ago, because we wouldn't be able to handle like the internet fritzing out all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, dial up.
Oh
Modem.
my gosh.
Oh,
No,
glory.
we couldn't do it.
Glory be.
But I mean, that's amazing, but that's a huge change.
Yeah, and it begs the question, what are the implications when you're thinking of your business, when you're thinking of the area of leadership you're in? Look at the context, look at the change in culture, look at the trends, look at the currents that are shifting. Not the waves of things that come and go, but the currents.
Yeah.
What do they mean for how you lead now?
Yeah.
What does that mean for your learning? Does it mean anything for your training?
Right.
Yeah, you're a great coach, but maybe no one's meeting one-on-one anymore.
Right.
Yes, you're a great communicator, but what's the best vehicle for that communication?
Yeah.
Is it still in person or is it the internet?
Yeah. Is it still blogs or is it now a podcast? Or is it, was it text messages and now it's Voxer? Or was it phone calls and now, I don't know. Depends on what your leadership is. But.
And we're not saying that we know the best things. We're saying it's important that we know as leaders what the change in culture means for how we function.
Yeah, and I've heard a number of leaders, and I do feel empathy towards this, but just the sense of like, man, I just got to this next understanding of the culture, and then it shifted on me.
Yeah.
And I get it. And if you need to find some support, talk through it, find encouragement, but that is just what it is.
Yeah.
Like it's not, and it's also not going to stop. I mean, the predictions right now are that there's going to be more change in the next 10 years than there was in the last 50.
Wow.
That's the kind of stuff. I mean, I don't know how they predict that
that's
stuff.
taking you back. That's taking you back. That's taking you back to the 70s,
That's what
everybody.
I'm saying. That's what I'm
taking
saying.
you back to the 70s.
So that's the kind of stuff that people,
When we used to encourage people to have a glass of wine in their pregnancy.
right.
And smoking with pregnancy was fine.
in restaurants. Yeah, right. So we've learned a lot since then, and look how much the assumption is that we're going to learn that much and we're going to see that much change in the next 10 years. I don't know what that means, but that's the kind of thing that the change researchers are talking about.
And I think it's worth identifying. I mean, we give the example of technology, but what about the demographics of your city?
Yeah.
The demographics of your schools?
Right.
What does that mean? And does that change how you teach? What does it mean for the languages you need to learn?
Right.
And we, again, because we may rely on our past, we may be nostalgic for a previous day.
Yep.
And sometimes when we're threatened by cultural shifts and threatened by changes, we eulogize and we kind of we place monuments on the past and wanting to go back to a former day when it was better.
Right.
When actually we just don't like the vulnerability of the present or the future.
Ooh.
You know, and that it may shift our place in society.
It may shift our place, and we might not have the assumed authority that we used to.
Yeah, and we may have to work harder to have a competitive edge.
Exactly.
It's a different competition.
It is. So this is not just towards church leadership or ministry leadership or even just like startups or business world. Think about this in regards to, I'm thinking about some of my friends who have family-owned businesses and the ways that those HVAC companies or those electrical companies, like you just had to change, not just like the actual technology of your product has changed, technology of how you use how your business runs has changed. The people that you're hiring now have a completely different way of seeing the world because of they are younger. Everything. And I know that some people, this just even talking about this just brings so much anxiety. And I want to say I get that. And how do we work through that so that we don't get stuck in these plateaus and comfort zones? Because in some ways, not paying attention to this will result in being out of a comfort zone in a way that will be very abrupt and not fun.
Yeah,
and choosing to move through it.
And if we can learn to be agile as leaders, if we can learn to be lifelong learners as leaders, then this is an opportunity to take the skills that we have and transfer them into a new era.
Absolutely.
But it will require us learning and thinking through. And you know, these changes don't just have to happen to us. There are some things, you know, when an earthquake hits and devastates a community, people aren't prepared. Right. There are things they're not prepared for. Right. But for cultural shifts, for cultural earthquakes, maybe there are some we can actually be prepared for. Yeah. That we know technology is here to stay. Yeah. So what does that mean? We know that there are certain things within our culture that are here to stay, whether you like it or not.
So I think that you brought up an earthquake. I was just talking to some friends who live in California, and they bought a new house.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how the construction industry in California has completely changed so that houses are earthquake proof to some degree. Not maybe fully, but they're just literally made with different things. What we're talking about is you see the damage that happens to, you know, metaphorically speaking, to the house, and then you rebuild it the same way when you know you're on a fault line.
Oh gosh.
So what we're saying is that cultural earthquakes have happened. We know that. They're going to continue to happen.
Yeah,
so
we know that too.
We can't live in fear, but we can be more prepared because we can learn from the last one and say, well, let's not build with the same materials because we need to have more flexible materials for an earthquake.
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of way of thinking about your leadership, thinking about your business, thinking about your coaching, thinking about your staff or your team, thinking about your own capacity.
Yeah.
How do we recalibrate? Of course, there maybe is a moment for grieving, for processing the trauma, but then how do we rebuild in a way that's not about fear, but about preparation?
That's good.
Well, want to go to the next one?
Next one is the next plateau we can get into in comfort zone is, again, and hear us when we say we're not saying these things are bad,
Right.
but if we don't think beyond, then they may be limiting. Mm-hmm. So we were thinking about network and the lie that we don't have to expand it.
Right. Like I know who I need to know in my business. I know who I need to know personally, as far as mentors go. I have the people in my life. I already have these needs met.
But if we are thinking of not relying on our past achievements, and if we are thinking of a change in context and culture around you, then that is going to have implications on the relationships. We're not saying get rid of the ones you have, unless of course they're toxic, then feel free. But
yeah, refer to leveling up your community and the 7 types of relationships that you should look for and the 7 you should avoid. Anyway, continue.
But what we are saying is, again, this whole idea is what brought you here won't get you there. I don't know where the there is you want to get, but there are new people there. There are new relationships that are required. And they may require time and effort and energy that you may feel you don't have time for. But again, to reach beyond the comfort zone will mean investing in relationships which are elsewhere.
Yeah, and this is harder for some personalities than others. Of course, some personalities just have a little bit more capacity for multiple relationships.
Social butterflies.
Yeah, you know, the example that came to my mind right away is, I mentioned this, just the idea of hiring people, and now you have younger people, for instance, but it's things like the network needs to be broader because the main table of influence doesn't represent everybody in the group. Yeah. That would be an example. So do you have somebody of Generation Z or a millennial that you trust, or to flip that, a boomer that you trust to be at the table to give
or
feedback?
An Xer, because we do exist.
Did you notice how I skipped it?
I know.
Yeah.
But
who do you have?
It happens so often.
I know. Who do you have at the table? Obviously, generation is just one aspect of representation. Obviously, we're talking about people coming from different cultural backgrounds. We're talking about the people who need to be at the table who understand the new technology, for instance, or I don't know what it is for you, but you can see how if your network is limited and you don't think it needs to expand, you could be missing some crucial aspects of how to get to the next level and where you need to go and where there is. That is a plateau that can often hold people back. Okay, the next one is the plateau that comes from the lie of arriving. We've arrived. I've arrived at all the knowledge I need for this trade. I've arrived at the educational level of my understanding is where it needs to be. I don't need to learn anything new. This is actually really sneaky, I think, because I don't know that all of us, when we're dealing with it, think about it in the front of our mind. But I think it can really easily happen where we think, I don't need to be in a posture of learning anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I'm even trying to think of how to respond because there's something so wonderful about achieving something.
Yeah, right.
That again, it's important to say, look, we're not saying these things are terrible. It's just that they're changing. Right. Do you know what I mean? They're changing, whether it's your kid in school or whether it's your workplace, it's changing. Yeah. And if you're not changing with it, right, if you're not adapting with it, then you find yourself becoming an anachronism in your own workplace.
Right. Yeah, becoming stagnant. Well, and I just think there's something really wonderful about being a person who's teachable and constantly in a posture of learning. And when people who lead me have that attitude, it fosters that amongst the people who are part of the team. and having that constant sense of what else can we learn, what can we grow in, how can we it's not just about doing more. It's not
it's
just
about
doing more.
curiosity.
It's about curiosity.
It's about curiosity for the world in which you're in, for the things that you've been gifted with.
Yeah.
And let me say, for those of us who would say they are Christians and have a Christian background, and you feel like God called you to this, and God called you to that, and God called you to ministry. Well, the ministry world is changing.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you?
Yeah.
God called you to stay at home and raise your kids, and now you're an empty nester. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're still a parent, obviously, but what does it mean for you now? And I think we can get so set on what calling looks like, and when the box changes, we freak out.
Yeah. Right.
Because I'd only thought as far as being a youth pastor.
People say things like, I didn't sign up for this. It's like, well, yeah. Yep.
And calling takes many forms.
Yeah.
But we can often put our arrival is, I'm called to ministry. My arrival is when I'm pastoring a church.
Yeah.
My arrival is when I write a book. My arrival is when I start a family. My arrival is XYZ.
Yeah.
And those comfort zones we are very loath to leave when things change on us.
Yeah, so it's not that there's no space in life for feeling settled.
No.
For having a sense of, okay, I'm at a new spot, and I need to be okay, content. Like there's maybe times to be content. But notice, this is the way I like to think of it. Notice when you feel like you're putting a pretty definitive period at the end of the sentence instead of an ellipses.
Or
a semicolon.
She went grammar on you.
Or a comma. Do you know what I'm saying? So to say we're in a season of kind of contentment and settledness, ... That's all we're saying. When you start to say like period, end of sentence, like, there's an anxiety, there's a sense of like, I need this to stay the same. And that's where we lose our agility.
I wonder as well whether some of the markers are, and I'm probably thinking of ministry spaces right now, is when we're threatened by what's coming.
Oh yeah. Well, change is hard. Yeah. We can acknowledge that. Change is hard. I don't think that people really are afraid of change. We often say that. I think people are afraid of loss. And every time there's a change, there's something that we're losing. Yeah. And so it also requires, I think, the plateau and comfort zone thing. To move on, some people you might need to grieve. You might need to do some intentional grieving.
Yeah, because I think as well, I think the lie of arriving is a very tantalizing thing. If you've worked really hard for something, or you've worked hard to achieve something, and to get out of that space, or to get into a new space, and you've got there.
You never thought you were going to get there, maybe?
And you've reached your top, you've reached the top level, and you realize there's nothing there. There's nothing there.
What I thought it was going to be.
It's not what I thought it was going to be. Then what? Yeah. So I think even the lie of arriving is one that sense of it becoming a comfort zone which you hold on to tightly. But the other is the disappointment of when you arrive at that space and it's not all it was cracked up to be.
Yeah. Can I speak just for a second to the lie of arriving when it comes to our faith and having quote unquote figured it all out?
Oh,
as you know,
let us do this.
As you know, passionate about that. Wrote a book called Stay Curious.
Stay curious. Buy it, friends. Buy it.
But what I want to say to people out there is, there's a lot of concern for quote unquote the next generation. I don't love that phrase because I think like they're here now. Yeah. But when I think about your kids, Joe, who are teenagers and maybe college students, young adults, there's this kind of concern that they're not going to get it. Yeah. And what I want to say to people who feel like, I don't want to feel the tension of the curiosity of wondering, and I want periods at the end of the sentence about what I believe. The space that around you then feels anxious when people's questions come into them. Yeah. And if you're concerned and you want these people to be people of faith who pursue Jesus and who care about their spirituality, then the posture and the space around you will be different if you're someone who says, this is what I really believe, but I'm also open to hearing people's questions, and I'm creating space for curiosity around me. That's the kind of leaders, mentors that the younger generations need to create a space that feels safe for them to answer their questions. I really think this process of writing the book, I've come to this conclusion that with we talk about the nuns and the duns, right? The people who are leaving church. A lot of people I think are saying, they're leaving church because they're doubting their faith and they don't believe in God anymore. I think that's part of it. I also think that the church, Big C, our family systems, didn't leave space for their questions. No. And that's part of why they left. Maybe even a bigger reason than they fell out of a faith in God. And that space for the questions, when your posture is, I've arrived, it does not create an environment around you that feels like questions are welcome.
And I think it's brilliant. And I have to say that I have bumped into a number of people who thought they'd arrived in their faith and their actual lives told a very different story.
Yeah, well, there's that too.
You know what I mean? Their actual lives. I think there have been times when our certainty has been a desperate mask to cover the questions we still have. Because let's be honest, as we get older, it's just that the questions become different.
Sometimes deeper,
You know,
and
deeper.
more.
How we handle loss, what happened to our marriage, what happened to the parents we thought we were going to be, what happened, why did that relative die?
Yeah.
All of these things, the things that with the jadedness of just the years.
Yeah, the cynicism. Yeah.
And it may not be as stark and as expressive as some, but it's kind of like this slow gnawing inside.
Yeah, and it's when certainties become an idol.
Yeah.
So I think
This is a faith, after all.
Exactly, and I think there is plenty of space for feeling like I know that my Redeemer lives, and that I'm in a relationship with Jesus. I'm not saying that there isn't space for that. I'm saying that the idea that and then all these other things are definite, and I know exactly about.
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to say Jesus is my true north, and a lot of other things I'm open to discovering and wondering about and to holding with people. I can understand that brings anxiety, but if you're anxious about the next generation, you've got to figure out how to be a person where that space
When there's room.
relationally happens around you, because that's the kind of space that young people need to go there. And statistically, if they push it and they go there, they will come back to maybe a shift, but a vibrant faith.
Wow.
That's the statistics. But who are we going to be? The posture of openness and learning and always being teachable is the best we can be for our whole life. That has to be like we're going to always be this way. That's the way to overcome the plateaus and the comfort zones and that.
Interesting.
Okay, the last one. It's kind of connected in some ways, I think.
Yeah, the lie of the perfect time to do something,
Yeah.
perfect time to achieve something, the when I'm ready.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because it's often a lie that's there to prevent discomfort.
Right.
You know what I mean? On some levels, what makes us a comfort zone? Well, because we hang out there a long time waiting to be ready.
Right.
We plateau, our dreams and ideas plateau, our adventures plateau, our aspirations plateau because we're waiting for the right time to do them. And life is still happening, and our culture is still shifting, and our friendship group is still changing. And meanwhile, you're waiting for the right time.
Yep. And sometimes it's about like you're gonna miss the adventure or the thing that the dream. You're saying I'm waiting for the right time to try to start that business or try to do that thing or to experiment with that new idea. Or it could be very relational or very personal, where it's like, well, we're not going to have kids until we have it together financially in all these different ways. Yeah. And I'm not advocating anybody not being wise. I'm just saying, is there a great time to have kids? If you feel called to that, then there's a different question to be asked.
Yeah, and there's a way in which we can engage with those questions.
Yeah.
Is it's not the right time, and then that's that?
Right.
And we haven't actually thought why we're saying that, what we're working towards, or is that part of an ongoing process?
So what we're saying, I think, is it depends on where you're at, but don't assume that the perfect time will ever come. Yeah. The perfect time. Is there a better time? Maybe. Is there some more things we need to think through? Sure.
Some things to attend to, perhaps.
But the amount of times that people have said, well, it's not quite the right time for me to start investing for my retirement, and then you're 40 and now you have to dump half your income. I mean, it's just, it's things like that. The
alarm clock is not going to go off and say it's time.
It's not.
It's not. It's not going to happen.
In so many different aspects of life. So considering just going for that thing, be wise, bring other people into the conversation, but maybe it's time to start that next degree. Maybe it's time to figure out how to finance that dream. Maybe it's time.
And maybe it's time to work out why you say that phrase to avoid things.
Yeah, and make sure that if it's true that it's not the right time, you're not saying that for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
To stay in your plateau or your comfort zone.
Yeah.
All right, so plateaus and comfort zones. I understand why people want to stay in comfort zones because obviously...
Because they're comfortable and they're
uncomfortable
comforting.
To be outside of them.
Yeah. But our lives and our leadership is a journey of risk and adventure and the call of the wild and the unknown. Yeah. And it's understandable that we want everything to feel safe, but actually ironically, the plateaus and comfort zones aren't safe places at all. They just look good.
Yeah, right.
They just sound good, but they're not actually real.
It's the whole idea of like scary versus dangerous.
Yeah.
Like it's scary to think I'm going to go out of my comfort zone, but it might be dangerous for your future to stay in it.
Yeah.
That's not good. So
that's good.
And I also think when it comes to Plateaus, it makes sense that you want to stay there because it feels level.
Yeah.
And you feel
we've accomplished something.
Steady.
Yeah.
And going, it either feels like a free fall, like I'm going downhill, that's not comfortable, or I'm climbing up and it's hard.
And I was just thinking, you know, I can see why I think of a lot of ministry leaders who have sabbaticals and they take a moment to regroup and to reset, because you've been doing something for 10, 15 years and you're tired, or you've been working on a particular project for a long time, you're tired. And I know that whilst pastors have it, that's not necessary, and not all do, to be fair, not all do.
No.
But it's not realistic for a lot of people.
Most probably.
Okay, it's not realistic for 90+% of people to have that time to reset. That length of time, that all funded.
Right.
But I do think there is something for us when we reach stages of a plateau where we need to explore how we can take some time and give some time to reflection.
Yeah. I actually was thinking about this the other day because we were talking about that exact thing about how sabbaticals are something that kind of are for people of privilege.
Yeah. And when you say
by kind of, I mean for sure.
That's just a nice way of saying it is.
Yeah. And I personally have not had a sabbatical like that, but
I'm glad. I mean, and don't get me wrong. I'm glad people get to have them.
I am too. I am too. But I was actually wondering about ways to create a sabbatical-ish experience for you. And one of the ideas I had was whenever there's been power problems in different cities, there's a thing called a brownout where the power is not fully on, and so the lights are browning out. And so it's like, I wonder if some people could have a brownout. And so what that maybe means is for you or for your family, for a month, you're not going to do social things, or technology is going to be off, or you're going to say no to anything that's optional for just a month. And that's your brownout. Yeah. Do you still have to do your job? Probably. Do you still have to show up? Yeah. But you're actually creating that margin, not permanently, but you're able to have a brownout sabbatical instead of a full out sabbatical. And
that's a really good practical way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's not easy either.
No.
But I think it's doable for more people that if they really were to work it out and maybe plan ahead for it.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't know any pastors who have like, I'm having a sabbatical, lay the potato, do you know what I mean? And they decide it overnight. They often plan it ahead for the summer. And
often they actually do have a project they're working on too, to be fair. There's actually some work that's being done. Productive. So so I think that's some things for people to think about. So we're gonna give you some questions to process. And just to take with you into maybe some journaling. For sure, if you have a conversation partner, this would be great to talk through these things.
So, question one, or task number one.
Task number one.
We'd like you to look at what are the top 2 of the plateaus and comfort zones that we've referred to that you need to think about. So, I'll say them again. Relying on past achievements, your context changing around you, the feeling like you don't have to expand your network, the lie of arriving, and the lie of the perfect time. Which one of those, or which 2 of those are the ones when you're like, ooh.
Yeah, don't let yourself get like bogged down by, 5 things. Yeah. Just because then that can actually paralyze us. Yeah. So maybe just the top 2 that gave you the most, I wonder about this.
Yeah, what ones gave you the most pause or invoked the greatest reaction within?
Yeah. So then the next thing we'd like you to do is to take those 2 things into some conversation with God. If you're a person of prayer, if you're a person who relates to God on this level, just invite you to say to God, okay, here's the 2 things that stuck out to you from this list that Joe and Steph did. What is your invitation for me in this season? God, what is it you might be calling me into? And I think I use the word invitation intentionally because even if it's hard, God's inviting us. Invitations are good. Yeah. They're good things. And I think sometimes we miss the invitations, almost like we get so much junk mail and then there's like an invitation to something awesome in there, but we never open it because it's in the pile. And I think that God might have been like, well, I already sent one to you, but here's another one. Because God's really gracious and loving. So just taking those 2 things to God and say, maybe you want to write them down on the top of a sheet of paper and then just do some listening.
Yeah, that's good. And then the last point, or the last task to do is, once you've had some time to process that invitation, reflect on it, what's one step for each of those areas? And when I say each of those, I'm not saying all 5, but the 2 that have stood up for you, one step for each. And so that you can begin to respond to that invitation.
Yeah, responding to God. And I really encourage you, make the steps realistic. Yeah. It's just the first step, not the first 5 steps.
We're not saying all the things that you're going to achieve.
But if you don't start with the 1 step that's actionable, then it ends up being just like remember when I thought about this and now it's too late.
Yeah, so if you know you need to expand your network.
Yeah. What's the next thing?
What's the next thing? Is it an event you need to go to?
Is it going on LinkedIn?
Is it researching in some way what networks are available to you for your particular sphere? if it's about the context changing around you, one of the things you do is go and walk around your neighborhood, or whatever the context. Go walk around your office.
Yep.
Do some observing.
Yep.
Observe what people are listening to. Observe
And invite the Holy
what is
Spirit to
popular.
speak to you while you're doing that. Yeah.
Pay attention to what you're seeing on the news. Observe the news from a different perspective to the one you normally invest in.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many different things.
Yeah, there are lots of things you can do.
And if you're feeling stuck, find a conversation partner and talk it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that might be, notice that could be a great thing for your conversation partner too.
That's
Might
good.
pique their interest.
Love it.
So there you go. We'll put these things in the show notes. But yeah, what got you here won't get you there. Plateaus and comfort zones. Let's take, if this is our comfort zone, we just want to push a little bit. We're not talking about obliterating it.
No.
We're talking about you need to stretch past it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how that is, what that needs to be for everybody, but I believe that you can discern that. And we believe in you.
We can keep moving forward.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Bye. Oh, that's still there. Hi, everybody.
I'm trying to turn it off with my watch.